like, oh, they've moved to another grade, but it's a big step because now they're getting into a new environment, a bigger school, maybe bigger buildings, and they're going to have to deal with a lot more teachers, and all of these teachers are new. And these are the things that you actually need to start considering now. Maybe your child was now used to preferential treatment because of their track record, or they were a prefect, or they were the head boy or head girl, but now they're going into a new environment where none of the teachers know them, so they have to prove themselves starting from scratch. They have to start all over again. So it's in preparing your children, it's important to guard against complacence, because sometimes the children will feel like nangoja I'm a good kid, intelligent and all, and what they do not realize is they're getting into an environment where all the teachers do not know them, and they have to prove themselves. And apart from that, if they were the number one at their primary school, they're getting into an environment where there may be many other number ones from different places, so the competition is going to be different. And even outside the looking at it from a negative perspective, maybe your child wasn't doing so well in primary school. Is their opportunity now to start all over, to start afresh, and to actually build a good reputation with the teachers. So these are some of the conversations you can actually have with your children, just in getting them prepared. And then the other thing that you need to start thinking about is, this is the time, this is the term where most schools are going to have their entrance exams. They're also going to have their entrance interviews. So it's important to ensure that your child is prepared for that. If, for example, they're going to a cheese school next year, there are those cheese exams that they have to take, which may be different from what they're learning in school. So you actually need to make sure that you provide the materials that will get them ready, because sometimes we get them into an entrance exam that they are not prepared for, and then they get into that entrance exam and that affects their confidence, because they're going to think, maybe I'm not good enough, something is wrong with me. Yet it's something that you can actually help them to prepare for. Find out what they need to know in order to pass the exams, and then help them to prepare. And then in terms of the interviews, if you know that maybe your child is on the shy side, they are not confident, they do not know how to speak up and all, you can start creating opportunities for them to learn that skill. Maybe at church, provide opportunities for them to speak, to say something in front of everyone, and start building their confidence, affirming them, so that when it's time for the interview, they're actually ready for it. Because like I've already said, failing an interview, an entrance exam, especially if if it is at a school where the rest of their friends have gotten a place, that can affect your child's confidence. So all of this, make sure you do it proactively, so that also pane pressure. Because when you do that pane pressure, that may work. That may defeat the whole process. Instead of helping your child to be confident, they actually become more anxious, because they're feeling like, I'm not prepared. What am I going to do? Then the next thing, which is the main thrust of today's discussion, is choosing the high school, the right high school. So I'll talk about some of the factors that you need to consider in choosing the high school that your child is going to go to. So the first one is the religious or moral orientation of the place that you're sending your child to, especially if it's going to be a boarding school, because your child now is going to spend most of their time, their formative years, teenage experience, they're going to be in that confined environment at a boarding school. So does the moral values of the school, or the religious values of the school, align with yours as a family? And do you think your child is going to be nurtured spiritually in that environment? If not, then you need to look for ways to then compensate for that, which may be difficult if it's a boarding school. But then if it is a day school, you know that your child is going to be coming back home, and then you can cater for their other spiritual needs. So it's important to consider the religious and the moral orientation of the school. And then the next thing that you also need to consider is the alumni and success stories. So who's been at the school and what have they achieved? So if you're sending your child to a school where a lot of former students maybe are now professors in universities, or they are engineers, they've got this high profile careers all around the world, that helps, because these will serve as mentors to your children. And even when they go out there, they can have opportunities because they already have other older brothers and sisters who've been through their system, who are now in the world and will be willing to pull them up into their own circles. So it's something that's important to consider. And even if you are sending your child to a school that's completely new, it's important to look into maybe the owners. Who are they in terms of their reputation? And it's always better if the school has like a board that runs it. It's not run by an individual, because normally what happens is if it's run by an individual, then if something happens along the way, maybe they decide to sell the school, or maybe in the unfortunate event that the owner dies, it means that my standards are akutodzika. Mwana akambotanga zvakanaka form 1, form 2, everything else has actually changed. So it's important to look into the ownership of the school, because that will tell you also what the character of the school is going to be like. And then the other obvious choice is between boarding and day school. So are you going to send your child to a day school, or are you going to send to a boarding school? If you're sending them away from home, are they now emotionally mature and independent to handle themselves in a boarding school environment where mom is not around, dad is not around, and they have to like manage everything else alone? Are they mature enough to be in that state? And then also, why are you considering boarding school? Is it because you're too busy and you're not going to be home, or in your mind you're thinking agenda boarding dog no pass? You know, funny thing is that this is the impression that we had like growing up, not knowing that most boarding schools are both day and boarding. So within that school, you'd find who are day scholars, and then there are those who are residents there and are boarders. And if you were to ask or do a research from the teachers, sometimes teachers don't even know. Like, to them, these are just students. They are boarders who are doing well, and then their day scholars are also doing well. So it is more to do with the child than just the environment. There are children who will perform better when they are in day school, because as a parent, you're close to them, you're monitoring them, and you're seeing how they're doing, and then you're pushing them. And then there are children who will do better in boarding school, because maybe as a parent, you're giving them too much work and the environment is not conducive for them to be studying. So they would rather be in a boarding school setting where they've got time and room to study. But only a child who's already mature enough to study on their own will thrive in a boarding school environment, because they're not as monitored as you would monitor them if they're at home. So all of this you need to consider, and you're looking at your child as an individual. Kuti mwana wangu izvi anozvigona here, zvinobuda here. You know your child because you've been with them for a while, so you can decide based on that. And then the other thing that you need to consider here is the school culture and the emotional climate. So think about this. A toxic or overly competitive environment can actually affect a teen's confidence. You know, there are certain schools that are known for good grades, and then there's a lot of pressure to perform. I remember.
So it then becomes pressure.
Yeah, it becomes pressure. It is okay for the already gifted, academically gifted, because they thrive in such an environment. But if your child is not so academically gifted, that may actually be a strain on them. You know, I remember this one time having a conversation with this teenager, and she was actually in tears. So what happens at their school is, my teachers produce my results. They are rewarded like at the end of the year. They're given cars and big prizes and all of that. So she was saying, I wonder if the teacher is really concerned about my grades, or they're concerned about what they will win if we pass. So this is like how emotional she was. She's like, I don't think this is for my sake. I think teacher because I don't want a pay rise, or I don't want a prize at the end of the day. So such environment sometimes can affect a child's confidence, sometimes permanently. And even the way children are disciplined. You know, some of us, we grew up under the tutelage of my teachers. You ended up being very fearful as a person, and then you carry this fear. The next time you hear kuna interview, you just start shivering. Your heart starts beating fast, and you may not understand where you got that from, but it may have been as a result of how you were groomed the kind of environment that you were in yakato affect the confidence yakho, and you may not be able to recover that. So all of that,
Such a shame, eh? The impact that it may have, in the long run.
yeah.
Way then even affects you in adulthood. Okay.
And sometimes you might never sit down to think ndakazviwana
The
kupi.
papi, zvakatangira papi.
Zvitori nepazvakatangira. And now that you are a parent, you can look at these things proactively and then see how you can help your children so that they do not fall into the same traps that you fell into. So in a nutshell, these are some of the factors that you need to consider. And in your researches, in trying to find out about schools, try and be current. I hear people saying kuti ndokwandakadzidza kunodzidzwa zvisingamboite. And how old are you? There are generations. All the teachers vakakudzidzisa vasisiwo. It's now a completely different environment.
Coach Tafadzwa.
So it's important to be current. And you also need to go now. Tisati takuita advertisements, because when it's now close to next year, you spruce up your environment, you put up everything on social media so that one are attracted to the environment. But if you go now, you will get the real picture of what the school is, and everything, because they're not expecting anybody to be coming through and looking at them. So this is the best time to look into it. And then outside just the school choice, I'll talk about one thing that's important in preparing your child for high school, and that has to do with gadgets. When it comes to gadgets, this is my advice to parents. It's important to give your child a gadget early when they're still in primary school, at a time when they still listen to you and you can give them rules that they can follow. I'm giving you a phone, so with this phone, these are the do's, these are the don'ts. You hand it over every day at 8 p.m. and it's easy for them to actually get into the rhythm, into the system, because vachiri kukuteerera and they think you know more than them. But what sometimes happens is, because now a child is going to high school, you had said that you're not going to give your child a phone or a gadget, but now that they're going to high school, you're forced by circumstances to give them a gadget. And now you're giving them a gadget at a time when they're going away from home, at a time when they now think they know more than you. So everything they're going to learn about how to use that gadget, they're going to learn on their own. And they will not want to listen to you. And it becomes very difficult to enforce certain rules to them, because so at the end of the day, you see mwana who's in Form 1 anedzungure phone, they're talking to everyone on WhatsApp. There are times, even after this show, I get text from kids who are supposed to be in boarding schools that do not even allow gadgets, and they're texting.
Like how?
So sometimes wakura usina something and you're given and you're thinking you've got a lot of catch up to do, because you're not doing all of that. So you need to catch up. You need to also post like a lot of stuff on Instagram, on TikTok. You need to always be on Pinterest and all of that. But if you had given your son or daughter a gadget earlier and had walked them through so that they understand how to responsibly use it, by the time they're now in high school, they've at least mastered the basics and they will not be as vulnerable. So it's important to look closely into that area. Sometimes we over trust. Parents are overprotective when it comes to the physical, but then when it comes to online, they just like let their kids be. Anongopiwa phone, and we expect a 13-year-old to be responsible enough to know where the sites not to visit, to know when to drop their phone. It's not going to happen on their own. Even adults get addicted to social media, so you can't expect.
You have to set boundaries for them. For the kids.
You definitely have to set boundaries, and you have to do that early, so that when they're on their own now, maybe in boarding school, they know how to manage it. Yeah, so that's all I had for you parents. And if you are interested in getting more information about teenagers, feel free to contact me on my number. My number is 0773 606 728. 0773 606 728.
Thank you so much, Coach Tafadzwa, tinzim.com. A very enlightening segment here. If you're a parent, very, very helpful information for us. We're also live on Facebook. You can go watch it and share it with someone. We do this every Tuesday. We're getting into the news at top of the hour. On the other side of that, we have World Beats, where we give a global chart. We also have mental health matters with Tindai Anapiri. So just stick around for that and more.